This is a follow-up video to 2 years ago when I made a video about how DMT ruined my life. This is 2 years later, 2 and somewhat years later, or just 2. On the 13th of August, I had a DMT flashback, is the best way to put it. I had a panic attack. I woke up, and my panic attack was unlike... So, when you research panic attack and anxiety attacks, panic attacks are the far worse ones. I've had panic attacks. I've had anxiety attacks. This was in a completely different dimension. I woke up and I felt the fear. I felt the fear like I had taken 10 hits of acid kind of fear. Okay, so to be fair, I had drank the night before. Okay, keep that in mind. But I've drank in the past 2 years since doing DMT. And I've never had an experience like this. I woke up and I immediately got hit by dread times 1,000. I can't put it into words. And it was growing in intensity, and I was doing everything I could to try and calm myself down. I looked in the mirror, tried to breathe. I tried to watch YouTube videos. I tried to take my mind off of it, and it didn't work. So I went into my backyard, and I started pacing around the backyard at 7 o'clock in the morning when it's still very twilight and dewy, very wet. And the grass on the ground, the tree branches, the leaves on the trees, the morning sun all became crystallized. Like when I did my first DMT trip in my backyard, that's what I saw. Everything became crystallized. Everything became 1,000 times more bright and shiny and geometric. And I hadn't done DMT. I just woke up from a hangover, and it was so intense. Knowing that I didn't do DMT or I'd done any hallucinogens the night before, all I did was drink, I started freaking out even more. I started breathing so heavily that my lips and tongue chapped within 12 minutes. And I know it was between 10 to 15 minutes because I had woken up my mom to tell her that I was freaking out and that I might need to go to hospital. And she looked at her clock when I woke her up and she yelled at me for waking her up. She got mad at me until she realized I was in distress, and she shouted out the time. Anyways, the intensity of what I was experiencing was so vast, so supreme, and I'm a rational thinker most of the time. I was rationalizing the fact that I had not done any hallucinogens, I had not smoked any DMT, I was just coming off of a hangover, but I was also present to the idea that I'm having a psychological break. Go train, hold on. Thank you, train. I started hearing thousands of voices around me. I started hearing voices that I knew weren't there. Even though I was in the backyard, I knew those voices weren't there. For a minute there, I was like, are they? But I went into my mom's house and they continued. I started seeing shadow figures out of the peripherals, the corners. Every time I did this, I would see a body in a shadow, best way I can describe it, move and scurry and taunt me. Shadow figures that, you know, if you do your research or you believe in sleep paralysis and all that shit, that's as close as I can get to as an explanation as to what happened to me. I started seeing these fucking demons. Another train? Really? I started seeing demons out of the corner of my eyes, and I heard thousands of voices, okay? Like, not just a few, not a dozen, not 100, like, surrounding me. And I'm in my mental mind thinking, I'm in my mind thinking, I'm in between dimensions right now, because it's not like I think I'm hearing these voices. I hear them loud and clear. I hear thousands of conversations, and they're all about me. They're all about what's happening to me. And they're frantic, and they're loud, and they're intrusive. And I was... like, by this time, I was inside my mom's house, and I was looking for anything to calm me down. I was splashing water on my face. I was trying to breathe normally, but I couldn't. My breathing was so sporadic. So we ended up calling the ambulance, and the ambulance came, and it took however long. And they were very professional. They wanted my mom to stay away from the door and have a mask on when they came in, and they had masks and all that. They told me to try and put a mask on, but there was no way I could. My breathing was so intense, I couldn't even think of looking for a mask. And I was sitting on my couch, and they came in, and then they did my blood pressure. They had to do my blood pressure 3 times, because the first time they thought they were wrong. The second time they said, oh my God. There was a trainee, there was a girl trainee there, and I knew she was a trainee because on my ambulance ride and everything, they were telling her, oh, this is what you got to do, and yada, yada, yada. But she was like, oh, and the woman gave her a look like, don't say that. And the main woman, who has obviously been doing the job for a long time, was like, it's a really good thing you called us. It's a good thing you called us. Please try and breathe. Breathe through your nose. Essentially, it was having a mini heart attack. And had they not put a breathing mask on my face... And, I was continuously trying to drink. They're like, don't drink any water. Don't put any liquid into your body. So what happened was, when I came in from pacing around the backyard for 5 minutes, I ended up taking my Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic, but I use it for sleep. Now, there have been many times in my life where I thought I was psychotic, where I thought I was schizophrenic, and I've gone to the doctor and been like, I must be schizophrenic because these things happen to me. Not like this, but, you know, psychosis. And why can't I sleep? Why can't I turn my brain off? And so I was prescribed Seroquel for sleep. And... so I took a double dose of my meds, and it didn't do anything, because I wanted to fall asleep. I wanted to turn my brain off. Since 2013, I've suffered extreme insomnia, as people who have followed my channel know. And I just took a double dose, and they said it had nothing to do with the meds. Once I got to the hospital, they're like, you didn't take a dangerous dose. It had nothing to do with the meds. But when they got there, they're like, don't take any meds. Don't try and drink any water. We have to take your blood and all this stuff. And before I got into the ambulance, I started walking around my neighborhood trying to walk it off. And they were trying to direct me into the ambulance, but trying not to touch me too much. So this is the state of mind I was in. Them trying to touch me, them even thinking of touching me, them having multiple thoughts about thinking of touching me. I was thinking what they were thinking. I was in their brain. I was aware that they are acknowledging all the signs and symptoms they witness or are familiar with that were happening to me, and I was in their heads looking at me, while having thousands of people talk around me that weren't there, and having shadow figures. And as I finally calmed down and got into the ambulance, I realized that, like, this is probably it. This is probably how I'm going to live the rest of my life, if not kill myself soon, because I'm psychotic. I've had a psychotic break. I've had a schizophrenic episode that has led to me being either schizophrenic or psychotic for the rest of my life. And in the ambulance driving me there, they were trying, and this is the thing, I'm perceptive too much for my own good. I was aware that they were saying specific things to try and calm me down, shoot the shit type of specific things, like what's your favorite, and you know, what'd you do yesterday? And I was realizing they were doing that to try and calm me down, which in a sense is supposed to calm the patient down, but it didn't. I was aware of every movement of all four wheels in that ambulance. I was aware of every spin. I was aware of the gears that were making the tires spin. I was aware of the fuel that were making the gears that were making the tires spin. I was aware of their thoughts. I was aware of too many of my thoughts. I was aware of everything. When ignorance is bliss is used in conversation and people say, nah, fuck you. Ignorance is bliss, and I often wish that I didn't know as much as I do. And I'm not saying I'm a fucking brainiac or anything. I'm saying there are psychosis moments in my life from childhood trauma that caused me to rethink and overthink and everythink the universe. And you can quote me on everything. Thinking too much. So much so that my brain doesn't turn off and I'm awake all the time, which causes my chronic insomnia, which causes me to drink, which causes me to use my sleeping meds inappropriately. My brain does not shut off. My body sleeps and my brain blinks. So, on the way to the hospital, I'm noticing like, if you've watched a J.J. Abrams movie, like Star Trek or anything, lens flares, they were amplified to a torturous extent. Lens flares on shadows, okay? A flare, a flash of light and a stream of light in a shadow. Break that down. Think about that. I was in a state where hello, B. I was in a state where I was sure that I was crossing over into a different dimension. Not necessarily dying, but my brain had reached CERN capacity. I opened up a black hole inside of my mind and I was traveling to multiple dimensions. And I get to the hospital and they take me into the emergency and they sit me in a chair. Worst hospital experience I've ever had, by the way. But when I got there, they sit me in a chair because they have to talk to the security and everybody about bringing me in. And I'm just sitting in this uncomfortable chair watching people around me suffer, watching people with bandages, watching people hard to breathe, watching aggressive people being brought in by police, and like I'm literally in a hell. Like in my first DMT Ruined My Life video, I talked about a dream mother and hell and demons pinching and pulling and too many of them and claustrophobia. I was living it this time. This wasn't a dream. I was literally in the hospital living like in House on Haunted Hill type of insane asylum and demons. Like that's, but I was there. I was in the hospital experiencing this. And everybody else around me are worried about their pains and their agony or whatever, but they're not aware of the mental madness that exists in our dimension as physical human beings of overthinking. Which I wasn't overthinking. I was thought. I was thought. I was everybody's thought. I was the hive mind. So after a while, they brought me into this room that was the mental health room. Oh, this is the best part. They brought me into this room that was no bigger than a big closet. The walls had paint missing. There were like stains and stuff on the walls. There was a window that looked like if you were in a police room, people were looking through you at the other side. There was a window there on the one wall, and then my wall facing the entranceway out, the door was open and there were nurses in the hallways folding up blankets, just talking to each other about bullshit. But the way they were talking down the hall was so loud to me and so annoying. It was torture. And this room had no paintings, no color. It was just like chipped away, and there was a hospital bed with no pillows, just a sheet on the bed. And this was the mental health room. Like, mental health for who? A criminal who just killed his whole family? Sure, put him in that room. He deserves to be in that room. Not me. I was in this room that looked like hell. And this is going beyond just my idea that, or my mental state that I'm in hell. Anybody who's mental health going into that room. Anyways. This was like taking 10 hits of DMT in 5 seconds. This entire trip. I've done DMT 3 times in my life. And each trip was different. The first trip was more geometrical and visions. The second trip was more knocking on the door to the other dimension. Seeing the other dimension, but not actually going in, but seeing it. And then my third trip was no dimensions, no geometry, just pure hell, like darkness. Oh no, B. Get out of the glass. Don't get wet. Bye. Yay, we saved the bee. Anyways, this was a 50 hit, 100 hit DMT trip without doing DMT. And when people say you have acid flashbacks, I didn't know it was possible to have a DMT flashback. But when I woke up, I smelt the DMT, I tasted it. I tasted the DMT. You know, if you've done DMT, you know that taste. And you know that smell. Not the smell outside while you're smoking it, the smell inside of your skull when you hit that. If you've done DMT, you know what I'm talking about. I felt, smelt, tasted, and heard DMT times 1,000, even though I hadn't done it. And I haven't done it in 2 years. No less than 2 years, no more than 2 years and 3 months, I don't know. So this is a warning to people. I didn't fully respect DMT the last time I did it, and that's why I had that life-ruining trip that fucked me up so much. And I can say, 2 years later, I'm still haunted by it. I'm still fucked up. My brain chemistry is fucked up. If you're an addict and you're a manic depressive, don't smoke DMT hoping it's going to cure you. I'm living proof, even though I'm just one science experiment in the grand scheme of things. I'm one of those experiments telling you, if you have coexisting mental issues and addiction, don't do it. Please, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not good. I had a DMT flashback that was worse than any drug I've ever done. And I've done more drugs than anybody I know. I could probably stand beside Hunter S. Thompson. And I know a lot of you are like, bullshit, change the video. There are a lot of people who will back that up. And that's also, well, he's done a lot of drugs, so he's fucked up. I haven't done a lot of drugs. but I'm still manic depressive and I'm an addict. I'm just telling you, look, man, woman, LGBTQ, whoever the you are, don't do DMT unless, I don't know, don't. I had 2 really good trips before my last one. I'm just telling you my side of the story. It's not a good idea. I'm ending the video. That's all I have to say. Be careful.